This video is a very preliminary introduction to the notion of qualitative designs in child and adolescent psychiatric research. Most research in child and adolescent psychiatry published in peer-reviewed international journals are quantitative. That means that these studies are based on dataset, on statistics, on numbers. But there are other types of research. They are called qualitative because they rely on text, on photo, on video, and just an historical example, the work of Sigmund Freud, for instance, was some kind of qualitative research. Qualitative and quantitative approach in research are supposed to rely on two radically different perspectives. There are many books and many papers about that. First, the epistemology are different. The epistemology of qualitative research is said to be constructivist, that is, the experimentator creates what he observes, while in quantitative research, the epistemology is positivist, reality does exist independently from the researcher. Of course, qualitative research are working with words, while it is numbers for quantitative research. The first one is exploratory, the second one is confirmatory. Induction should be at the basis of qualitative research as opposed to deduction for quantitative approach. Qualitative approach would be better for subjective questions, while objectivity is crucial for quantitative approach. Qualitative research are said to be appropriate to grasp what happens in the real world, while it is the laboratory, which is the place where quantitative research are done. The notion of validity is different between both approaches, with accuracy, for instance, opposed to reliability. And there is a tradition to say that the researcher is engaged with his material in qualitative research, while for quantitative research, the researcher is supposed to be neutral. The opposition between words, numbers, qualitative and quantitative approach in research are indeed supported by a long history. Remember what said Pascal, the philosopher of the 17th century, in his Pensées. He opposed l'esprit de finesse à l'esprit de géométrie. L'esprit de finesse corresponds to a description of the world in its complexity with nuance, while l'esprit de géométrie represents reality through abstract and formal concept. This is typically the opposition between qualitative and quantitative approach. Some psychologists have proposed that people who like numbers will have different psychological traits than people who like words. In particular, mathematics would correspond to some kind of superego, because in mathematics 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and this is a rule, and you cannot do anything about that, and this is some kind of superego. In the past, it would say that the left hemisphere would correspond to quantitative approach, while the right hemisphere to an intuitive way of thinking. It seems to be no more relevant. But what could be relevant, because it is said by a Nobel Prize, Kahneman, a psychologist and economist, he distinguished two ways of thinking, the fast way and the slow way, and something the fast way could be considered as the qualitative and the slow way as quantitative. And at last, it is often said that qualitative approach are for soft science and quantitative approach for hard science. This difference that we pointed between qualitative and quantitative approach, in fact, could be related more to a tradition than to a reality. If we come back to our previous slides, we opposed two epistemology, constructivist versus positivist, but nowadays, nobody is anymore constructivist nor positivist. People are post-positivist or pragmatic realist. We oppose words versus numbers, but look at molecular biology. They don't use, most often, numbers. But anyway, they are not qualitativist. The opposition between exploratory versus confirmatory approach, but you can do exploratory statistical analysis with number. Induction versus deduction. Most philosophers today say that science is abductive and no inductive nor deductive. The question of subjectivity, we have seen that in psychiatry, we have subjective measurements, so we can put numbers with subjectivity. Real world versus laboratory. When you do epidemiological studies, they are supposed to deal with real world, and they are quantitative approach. the question of accuracy and reliability, in fact, in qualitative study, you can do inter-rater reliability studies. And engagement with material, all researchers are engaged with their material, even if they do research in neuroscience. Now, why should we use qualitative designs in child and adolescent psychiatric research? Imagine you are working on the question of the effect of SSRIs in depressed adolescents. You ask yourself the question, which study should I do to assess the effect of SSRIs? The answer will be basically a randomized controlled trial, which is a quantitative study. So you will include 400 adolescents. You will use the adolescent depressive rating scale. You will compare your drug to a placebo. And at the end, you will use a t-test, for instance, to compare both groups. And you will have the conclusion, if it works, A is superior to placebo. Okay, but you have still no answer to the question, what are the effects of SSRIs? To know the experience of patients when they take this medication, you have to do a qualitative studies. Now, in practice, how people do qualitative studies? First point, the sampling. As opposed to quantitative studies, the sampling here will not be done at random. Often it is done on the basis of a maximal heterogeneity. If we take the case of adolescent depression, we will take girls, boys, young adolescents, old adolescents, depression which is severe, depression which are mild or moderate, etc., etc. And we will include between 15, 20 and 40, 50 adolescents. And this number is not determined a priori. It is determined when the information obtained during the coding arrives at a certain level of saturation. Now the question of data collection. A classic are, of course, face-to-face interviews. But you can also do group interviews, case stories, photo elicitation, videos, which are very common nowadays, diaries, blogs, etc. In fact, you are very free as regards the data that you will analyze. And then, gradually, when your data are arriving, will happen the crucial phase of content analysis. This is a phase of coding, of a hierarchical coding. In practice, for instance, if you have text, transcription of interviews, you will code each sentence with a particular code, tag. And then you will regroup the codes in supercodes, and you will regroup the supercodes in hypercodes, etc., in a way to synthesize and to simplify all the information content in your data. You have many ways to do content analysis. You have bottom-up procedure, top-down procedure, and even among this procedure, for instance, among the bottom-up procedure, you have the grounded theory approach and the interpretative phenomenological analysis approach, which focus on the subjective experience felt by the patient. And ideally, you will do this coding and another person will do also the coding, so that you will be able to see the implication of the coder on the synthesis, on the conclusions that is done from the data. Now, let us see a real example. This is about a study which questioned the effect of SSRIs in adults. The content analysis was based on the interpretative phenomenological analysis background. This means that the author wanted to grasp the subjective experience of patients who took SSRIs. At the very end of this analysis, there were 4 big codes. The first was about the relief experienced by the patient, the sensation of disconnection, of deprivation, and the question of after SSRI. And concerning disconnection, there was 4 types of disconnection: an emotional one, a physical one, a social, and an existential one. Once you have obtained this supercode, you can illustrate them with sentences said by patient, typical sentence. For instance, a patient said, "This is what's happening to me at this moment. At this moment, this person got fired. and that I should be feeling this, and I should be feeling really anxious about this, but I am not, and I wonder why. Or I could hear the anxiety yelling somewhere inside me, but it was muffled, as if someone had put up soundproofing glass. When a qualitative study is well done, results can be eloquent. Now it is time to conclude, and just in a few words. Because people working in the field of child and adolescent mental health or child and adolescent psychiatry are used to do interviews. Because our research questions are often of a great complexity, with questions of culture, even religion, of brain, mind, etc. Because our sample size available are in general really small. Indeed, qualitative approach can be of a potential interest. But, like all research, they need great professionalism. Thank you.